Hello and welcome to the Girls Fuel podcast. My name is Haley. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition coach here to help you along your health and fitness journey by providing evidence and experience-based knowledge, and as always, full transparency. Today is an extra special episode because Jess and I have a guest. It has been a while since we've had a guest on, announcing Dr. Bill Campbell. Bill, thank you so much for coming. It felt weird calling you Bill. I don't think I've
Yeah,
ever called you by your first name before.
that's awesome. Thank you for inviting me. And I was surprised. I didn't expect to see you in Dallas. So it was nice to see you there.
Yeah, for sure. So, for those of you who are listening, I want to tell you a little bit more about who Dr. Campbell is and how we know each other from the space. So, Dr. Campbell is a professor of exercise science at the University of South Florida here in Tampa, and he's the director of the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory, where you work with both undergrad and graduate students, correct?
Master students, correct.
Mainly masters.
Yeah, I do not have a doctoral program. So all of my grad students are master students.
Amazing. And Bill and I first met, gosh, I think it was 20-ish at a like conference seminar thing here in Tampa. And this was before I lived in Tampa with John Gorman and Jason Theobald. And I believe that was when you did a talk on refeeds or diet breaks or something along those lines then. And I feel like we've just bumped into each other at random places ever since and been like, oh, yeah, it's you.
That's right.
And Bill, so one big thing that I want for us to kick the topic off with is knowing that you built such a incredible career exploring some of the most impactful areas of exercise science and nutrition. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what specifically your lab researches, what topics you're most interested in, and maybe where that interest came from, thinking way back to when you started.
All right. So my lab has two different focuses. It's mainly a fat loss lab, but also to some extent a performance lab, exercise performance. And that focus goes back to my graduate training where I did both. We did obesity research and we did sports nutrition or performance nutrition research. So essentially what I've done since graduating with my own lab is I've combined them where the focus is on fat loss, but we try to maintain muscle mass during a fat loss phase and also maintain performance. So exercise performance, if somebody's an athlete, their sport performance. But I identify, I wake up every morning, I'm a fat loss researcher, but I'm a little bit unique in the sense that my interests are more in helping people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle. So that means that I don't research people with obesity. I research fat loss in people who don't really have a lot of body fat to lose or people who are fit that want to lose a little bit more fat. And that makes me somewhat unique because, well, one, there's no
Mhm.
funding in that area. The government doesn't want to give fit people research money to get fitter. And I've built my whole career on it. And I always say that the research that I do is what almost all exercise scientists wish they could do, but yet for whatever reason they get sidetracked. They want to go after grants, they want to get money for other things, and I've never cared about it. If I'm going to work, I want to work on something that I'm passionate about. And I'm a Christian, so I always want to give God glory. I'm very blessed to have the career I have, and I feel like God has blessed me to be able to do exactly the type of research that I want to do.
It really is incredible. And just thinking about all the places I've heard you speak, and even I've listened to so many podcasts that you've been on, I feel like you've really intertwined the world of thinking about athletes, thinking about the general population that is that fit individual, but also you've helped so many online practitioners like myself, because, like you said, we take on the clients, but we don't have the resources to do what you do and really get down to the nitty gritty. And that's where today we're going to talk about a little bit of your research revolving around rapid fat loss that I know is still underway, in addition to some other things that you've seen in particular with women. Because again, women are very, maybe, I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, women were very under-researched compared to men. Would you say that's true?
Oh yeah, it was
Mm,
very it's a bad situation.
mm.
Still very underrepresented, but the tide has shifted much more in favor, or it's gotten better over the last decade. But for almost my entire career, over 90% of any research study done in exercise science was conducted in males.
Wow, that's a lot. And you really
Yeah.
started to shake that up.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Early in my career, I was one of the first to specialize in investigating female only population.
And I know you mentioned in Dallas too, you've been able to experiment not only in your lab, but in your own personal life. You've shared many times how you've done some of these different trials on yourself or even gotten your wife involved. And do you find that when you're like walking around in your normal life, people are always approaching you and getting advice and things of that?
Oh, no, I'm a very boring person in real life. And I'm not jacked, so I don't really attract much attention. But on social media, I like to think that I'm fairly available. So I do get a lot of communication through that. And I'm glad you said this. When I was in grad school, my wife was as close to a human guinea pig as possible. Every new machine that I needed to learn, I put her on. I learned how to draw blood on her. She drew the line at muscle biopsy, so she wouldn't let me do biopsies on her. But she's making a comeback. I'm going to be doing another experiment on my wife probably in February. So it's been a few years. Now, as you said, I test myself on almost everything that we do in my lab, but I like to think my wife's making a comeback.
That's amazing. That sounds like so much fun, honestly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll really start to kick things off with a big topic. So, Bill, being in the trenches with clients, and just for your reference, with our company, Girls Fuel, we only work with women. I think I have one male client right now, and that is something that I niched down into about 3-ish years ago, just because I wanted to specialize in the female physiology. So, one thing that we work with our clients on a lot is removing the measure of progress from the scale alone. And for some women, removing their self-worth from the scale alone. So I'd love to kick this off and have you explain to us what is the difference between fat loss and weight loss? And maybe can you break down what's happening in those processes internally?
Yeah, I'm going to sound a little harsh, but an ignorant person or an uneducated person only looks at scale weight. And scale weight, at least in our world of fitness, it's not advisable because when you're in fitness, you're very concerned, or even if you're not concerned, but your daily exercise activities have an impact on your lean tissue. I'm just going to call it muscle mass. There's fat-free mass, there's lean body mass. I don't like getting into the weeds of the definitions. I just call it muscle mass. So, body weight, changes in body weight make no distinction between weight loss that's coming from fat stores or from muscle mass. And that's very important from a metabolic health perspective, a physique perspective, and even long-term weight loss or a fat loss outcome. So, one thing I tell my students is whenever you read a weight loss study, you never stop it. Don't even look at weight loss, but that's never the destination. I'll give an example. Let me just finish the broad picture here. You always want to pull back weight loss and say, okay, if they lost 10 pounds, how much came from body fat and how much came from other lean tissue? Now, sometimes there's going to be body water with that, and that's a little nuanced. But you always want to look at fat and muscle loss, not just body weight. And I'll make a statement here. There's an entire that's interpreted incorrectly because of this very concept.
Mm,
And this area has to do with when people combine cardio cardio plus resistance exercise. The reality is when you look at all of that research, people always say cardio causes more fat loss. Yes, But when you look at when you add resistance training to cardio, they don't lose as much weight, but that's because they're maintaining more muscle mass. So again, researchers, a lot of fitness professionals, they'll interpret that whole area of research as saying, hey, cardio is better for fat loss. And it's not, or at least generally not in the long term. In the short term, it actually is better. If you're going to try to lose fat this week or this month, I would say do a lot of cardio. But if you're looking for long-term
Mm,
outcomes, resistance training, anaerobic activity base is going to result in the most fat loss and maintain the most muscle tissue. So I hope that answered the question.
Definitely. And that's just another reminder for all of the ladies listening. And I think most of our audience does resistance train. Make sure you're picking up weights and not just doing cardio. And there's a big craze right now, which has come back around. Oh, a cat. I knew that was going to happen.
Hey, look at that.
With all of this very low intensity training like Pilates and yoga. And I don't think you've researched this necessarily, but I'd be curious to know what the difference would be in lean tissue changes in a deficit in a group, say, that resistance trained only deficit and yoga Pilates only deficit. They're very different.
Yeah. So the comparison is again yoga, Pilates, dieting, and what was the comparison group? Dieting plus.
Resistance training only.
Oh, yeah. So that again, I'm going to tell you what I think would happen, but I'm
Yeah.
not aware of any studies. Resistance training is always the preferred mode of exercise when dieting because everything about a caloric deficit is catabolic, which is good for fat loss. You want a catabolic or breaking down effect on the body, but you don't want a catabolic stimulus for your lean tissue. So again, everything about dieting is a catabolic stress or a catabolic environment. So what we want to do in this overall catabolic environment is introduce as many anabolic stimuli as we can. And there's two things that do that. Resistance exercise is one, and then a higher protein diet or an optimal protein diet is another anabolic stimulus for the body. Now, in terms of yoga, Pilates, I'm very, I guess you would call me all inclusive or non-discriminatory. I think, once I got to do some more reading on this, but I'm generally open to do the kind of exercise that you want to do because then you're going to do that. And I have the belief that any form of movement is better than no movement. So I'm not the person who's going to say, oh, you should never do that. You should never do Pilates. You should never do walking. But I would say, if all else is equal, those aren't your best choices depending on your goals. If your goal is to have a toned physique or you're trying to build muscle or you're trying to have trying to optimize your metabolic health, resistance training is always going to be at the top. And my research is somewhat shifting to an older population. It's the best anti-aging exercise that you
mm,
can do for your body. Now, again, if somebody says, I hate lifting weights, I like to do yoga, I'm going to say, okay, then do yoga and be excited and happy that you are doing some form of physical activity. But over time, if they're my client, can we do 1 day a month where you're doing some resistance training? And then maybe we're going to induce a passion for this new type of exercise. So there's my thoughts on, I don't want to shame or disregard, but I also don't want to lie and say that's just as good as resistance exercise.
100%. And that's our view with our clients as well. We have a lot of clients that do a big mix. And I like that last thought of, hey, why don't you just try doing one training session a month? And
mm.
obviously, our hope is they like it and they start going a little bit more, a little bit more. But with what you've seen, what would you say is the true, and I know this is going to be a big, it depends. What is the true minimum effective dose for a adult, we'll say an adult female that wants to maintain lean mass in a deficit for how many times they need to strength train a week?
Oh, I would say a minimum dose would be 1 set to failure per week would likely maintain all of your muscle mass when dieting. Now, 1 set is not much, but you do have to take that 1 set to near failure. I would say within 2 reps of failure or even more. So it's not in terms of a minimum effective dose, it's not much. Now, let me say this. If somebody's currently training with 20 sets per week of deltoid work. They're just high volume, and they go to 1 set per week. That's going to be a little different environment because that's such a decrease from the stimulus that they currently have.
And to clarify, you mean 1 set per muscle group to fail?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
per
Okay.
week. Yeah.
Yep.
So that means I'm doing 1 set of chest flies on Tuesday to failure. In my opinion, that is enough to maintain one's muscle mass when dieting, assuming the dieting's not too severe, and assuming that's not a massive decrease in in their current volume. And something else, I don't know if you're noticing this. In addition to, I agree, this lists, low intensity, a lot of walking, yoga, Pilates,
Mm.
there's also this shift coming back, which is where I was when I first entered the profession. This low volume, very high intensity. Are you noticing that's also making a
Yep.
comeback?
Yeah. It was like all of a sudden, all cardio is bad. It makes you lose muscle.
Yeah,
Doing yoga does nothing. And now those things are all hot again. And for a good reason. Like, again, I think they all have really awesome benefits when combined. But when we're thinking about, especially thinking about our population as busy females, a lot of our clients are late 20s to mid to late 40s. They're busy, they're moms, they're business owners, whatever it is. We do really push them to prioritize that resistance training, and I'm glad that you were able to confirm that.
I
Now,
just had a quick question too. I was just on the topic of high volume versus low volume. I've seen a massive shift towards this low volume. I'm just wondering what your opinion is on when someone is in a fat loss. What should they be focusing on? Should they be focusing on high volume or low volume to really maximize the muscle that they can retain?
Yeah, we don't. I can't rely on much research because there's just not much that
Yeah,
exists in that situation. What I tend to recommend to people during a fat loss phase is as much as they can just maintain their current volume
yeah,
because that's actually going to be more of a stimulus for fat loss, which is their goal. Now we know in this competitive bodybuilding world, they're actually increasing the volume of resistance training and aerobic exercise. But that's to get people to really an unsustainable body composition that they
right.
don't maintain for very long. But when I'm working with clients, I said that's my baseline. Again, not a competitive bodybuilder, but let's induce a caloric deficit, one, but let's
Yeah,
try to maintain what you have been doing. That way, we're not reducing an anabolic stimulus on the body, one,
right,
and we're still having this caloric deficit or energy imbalance from the caloric expenditure of the activity.
right.
And one other thought here, even though I already said I'm not going to tell people, or I'm not going to tell people to stop doing yoga, stop doing things that just because I don't do them. I if I were a coach, I wouldn't work with somebody that wasn't willing to resistance train. There's plenty of other coaches that could serve them better. I'm a resistance training scientist, and that's everything I do is about resistance training. And we are being discriminatory. We're doing this, creating this very large female menopause fitness survey, and you can't even fill it out if you don't resistance train. So we are being a little snooty with who we're allowing to be a respondent in our survey. If you haven't been resistance training for the last 6 months, then thank you, but no thanks.
I think that's amazing. Somebody has to do it and really show not only the benefit of resistance training, is the goal to see the aging process or the progression of menopause? What is the goal of the survey?
So the goal of the survey is, let me just start more broadly for a second. We have tons of research on menopause, thousands of studies. And as we just discussed, over the last 10 years, we've gotten quite a bit more research in female fitness, but we don't have one survey study, not one, merging menopause and fitness. So
Wow.
this will be the first. So even if I got two subjects, even if I got you and my wife to fill it out, no, actually, you're probably too young. Even if I got my wife to fill it out, it will be the largest ever because it's the first. But essentially, what we're doing or what I'm doing, and I don't know how much you want to get into this, but I think you picked up on this at the Dallas conference that you were at. And by the way, I don't know how many of your clients listen to this. It's evident to me how much, I'll just say, money and resources you invest into your professional development and constant learning. And that is so impressive because so many coaches don't do that. I've seen you at multiple conferences. You don't have to go to conferences, but you do. And you're going to the best conferences. You're going to the conferences that are very pioneering. So the clients that work with you should feel just very well served and feel great about the education that you constantly put yourself in front of. So your constant improvement. So I just want to say I have a lot of respect for you for that.
Thank you. That's
Um,
my favorite part about the
sure.
job. You stop learning, then somebody's not going to get helped the right way.
Yes, yeah. And as I think I told you, I have so much to learn from you or most of those people at that conference because that's an area that I have not spent time learning about. But the survey that we're doing, it's a very broad initial survey that's going to serve to inform me about future work. So essentially, I think there's four different sections. So there's a demographic section, there's a fitness section, there's a nutrition section, there's an HRT section. So fitness, nutrition, hormone replacement therapy, and there's one more section. I'm trying to think of what it was. I know we have like motivation to exercise. Now, one thing we're not doing is because this is what's been done thousands of times is like symptomology of menopause. Like that, again, I could read a study a day until I'm dead because those have been done. But you will not find a study when you're asking women who are in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that are fit or that embrace a fitness lifestyle and what their experience has been going through menopause or their anticipation of going into menopause. So that's what we're doing. We're asking the younger women, you are fit or you're embracing a fitness lifestyle. What do you think is coming? How are you going to approach this? Then we have the women in during perimenopause or menopause transition. What's going on right now? Are you not sleeping well? Are you gaining weight? Are you experiencing weight loss resistance? Are you taking HRT now? If so, which kinds? If not, why not? And then for the postmenopausal women, what did you do or what do you wish you would have learned? So we have it's a pretty large survey, but we also have really cool open-ended questions that allow women to just share their story in case we didn't ask the right questions during the survey. It's I am, and I can't remember. But I know. Did you have was Dr. Ormsby was one of your
Yeah.
mentors? Yeah. So he's on board. He's one of my co-authors
Wow.
on this. So he's involved
Mm,
in this as well.
That's amazing. That really will inform so many
yeah.
women and also set the scene. I don't know about you, Jess, but I think about menopause. I saw my mom go through it, and granted, she
Oh
doesn't
yeah. All of our
anything with
clients
our
too.
clients. We'll have them take the survey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for some people, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that I think about regularly.
Yeah.
That's really
And
cool.
I think it will be very helpful for these women
Mm,
because what I learned through my wife's experience, I call it the train wreck group. There are some women that are going through menopause that
yeah.
it is their life becomes a train wreck. Not everybody. Some women go
Hmm.
through it with no major problems, and that's awesome for them. And then most women have some problems, but they're not a train wreck. And those are the stories we want to get. I want to know, okay, if you breeze through this, what did you do? What was your nutrition like? What was your fitness like? If you were a train
Hmm.
wreck, what I'm hearing anecdotally is a lot of these women are doing everything right. They
Mm,
exercise, they lift weights, they track macros if that's what they're doing, and still their bodies are just
hmm.
gaining a lot of fat. They have zero energy. So the survey it's a starting point that will really inform the fitness group of this midlife age. And I say midlife, I started at 40 to 60, and then I started hearing the complaints from the older than 60. And then I kept hearing some women go through early menopause. So right now it's like 35 to 75. So I was a big pushover with extending the age range.
Inclusivity. I love it.
There we go. Yes.
And that's where, speaking of, we see these women that are doing everything right. We see that as well, regardless of menopause, who they feel like they've done all the things for all of the years, but still they can't lose weight, whether it's 10 pounds. But I find for the majority of women that we see that feel like they're really stuck, it's 20, 30, 40 pounds that as they started aging, and I'm noticing a big uptick in my clients that are in their early, mostly in their early to mid 40s, according to their blood work, show no real signs of menopause. FSH and LH are still hanging out pretty low. Hormones are still fluctuating the way that they should be. They're still menstruating. Things are normal in that regard. But we've had quite a few that we've found having trouble losing weight. So that's where we wanted to talk to you more about the different approaches that you're studying for fat loss. So I would love to bring in the topic of rapid fat loss. And we'll preface this by saying that this probably isn't for everybody. We're here to learn what it is and what Dr. Campbell is doing with it in his lab. But what exactly is rapid fat loss? And maybe how does it differ from a traditional, slower approach?
Okay. And before I get into that, once again, the people that if you have clients that are struggling with this, the people that you are surrounding yourself with, you are the coach that I would want to have working with me, because again, the people that I know you associate with, especially at that Dallas conference and the conference where we met, those are the people that are solving these problems, or that are, as well as you. So feel good if your clients are listening to this. You've got the right coach. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite here because I beat the drum for many years that fat loss needed to not be fast, a slow approach. And that my thinking now has changed. And I say hypocrite, I actually haven't changed my thinking. I've just further defined some of the parameters. So the worst thing that somebody can do is embrace a crash dieting mindset or a crash dieting approach to weight loss or fat loss. And what is that? That is a starvation diet and tons of aerobic activity that will work for fat loss for most people. So why is it so harmful? It's harmful because of what happens as soon as you stop such a crash diet. And what we see from a few scientific studies is a state of hyperphagia that exists right when you stop the diet. So hey, I lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. No, you're done. You feel good because the scale weight's low. But what that scale weight didn't tell you was you lost a lot of muscle mass. And when that happens, we have some evidence that hyperphagia will now enter your life. And hyperphagia is an extreme and overwhelming desire to eat. So you essentially have an untamed or uncontrollable appetite. And what happens, according to the research literature, is you eat so much food and gain so much body fat in a short period of time that you actually have more body fat gained shortly after your diet than what you had before you even started your diet. Now, that exists because of crash dieting. That is different the way that I'm defining a rapid fat loss. The way that I define rapid fat loss is being very or extremely aggressive on a diet for a very short period of time and days. So historically, what happens is when you are using an aggressive diet for weeks at a time, you will lose muscle mass, your metabolism will plummet, and you will overeat when the diet ends because of this hyperphagic response. And by the way, hyperphagia seems to be most pronounced when you lose muscle mass, and it persists until you gain back the muscle that you lost during your diet.
Oh.
Yes. So the best thing we can do is design a diet where you don't lose any muscle at all so that you eliminate this insanely high hunger response. So what I've read, and then we actually conducted a study. We haven't published it yet, but essentially what if we were so aggressive for only a few days? And we're actually doing a current study on this literally right now. We have our second subject coming in tomorrow for this. What if you do an extreme diet, so a few hundred calories per day with a lot of aerobic activity for only 4 days? And what we think is going to happen, at least this is what has been reported in men with obesity, is it's so short but so aggressive that the body responds by dropping significant amounts of body fat, but it's so short that it does not result in the loss of lean tissue. So you basically you go in, it's like jumping into the deep end of the pool, and then you get out right away. And what at least the research that exists suggests you improve health markers, you lose a significant amount of body fat, and you maintain your muscle mass because you're not in it long enough to lose muscle mass. When I say crash dieting, that's what would happen if you extended this approach for 7 days, 2 weeks, a month, which is what some people will do.
No, definitely. And that's what we see a lot too is people go into this crash diet, or we see a lot of women just have no idea how many calories they need to be eating because for whatever reason,
Mm,
whatever decade they grew up in, there was someone thin on a magazine. Their MyFitnessPal told them that their estimated maintenance was 1,200 calories when it was 1,800, 2,000. So we get a
Oh,
lot of women that are just chronically, like decades worth of under eating. And like you mentioned, the crash dieting, yes, some of it's that, but some of it's unintentional. And then that hyperphagia.
yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people think about overeating and they're like, oh, I don't do that. I don't overeat every day. Why am I gaining weight? But what we've seen, and I'm sure you can agree, is it's not every day that the people are overeating. Typically, it's probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we're overeating. And then starting on Monday, we start over and we restrict again. And that is enough to
Yes.
gain fat, is what you're
yeah.
saying as well.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed, and I'm going to just look in the mirror here, when I'm not tracking and I'm dieting, and this has been my situation, and again, I've been obese and I've been very lean, and I don't cycle to obesity, but I have recently, or in the last 2 years, and even in the last 4 years, I've been the leanest I've been since probably the last 20 years. So I just do this. I do this to learn, as we talked about. It stimulates research. But when I'm not tracking, when I'm eyeballing things, which I'm horrible at, but I feel like I can't believe I'm not losing weight. I'm dieting. But I'm not, because when I'm not tracking, that's when I'll pick up some M&Ms on the M&M bowl. If there's M&M, I'm like, that's only 10 M&Ms. That's not a big deal. It was probably actually 30, and I did 3 times maybe. It's just all of that. But when I'm tracking, I always lose weight when I'm dieting every single time. So I'm just not skilled at intuitive eating. I wish I was. It's clearly the best way to live your life. It's just not for me. I don't have the discipline or the skill, whatever you want to call it. But I have noticed in myself and others, you think you're dieting, but a lot of times you are not.
My fiance is that way as well. I am very skilled in intuitive eating now, but it took a lot of years of going through that cycle of not being very skilled. And in your studies, you're having people track, correct?
Yes, all the time. Yeah. But that's a great scientific world. We have to do that. We don't have to, but we always do that because, yes, that's just how we do our studies. But that's not always how people are going to do it. And that would be a limitation of the application of
Mm,
my research to those people.
We preach both tracking and I honestly don't even like calling it intuitive eating anymore because to me, intuitively eating is truly listening to your body. But sometimes your body tells you it wants M&Ms, but really you need some leafy green vegetables that have more magnesium than the chocolate, right? So I like to think about it as like a mindful eating approach. So we'll transition our clients through tracking because most of them start with a reverse diet because nobody eats enough.
mm,
And that's also where I would be curious where reverse dieting comes in for rapid fat loss because calories in, calories out, we're assuming these people are eating enough to be able to create a deficit. But before to finish that thought, we'll cycle people through tracking fat loss, reverse maintenance, and then slowly get more mindful, intuitive, so to speak, so that way they know how to do it without blowing up, so to speak, if they need to. But I'd be curious, did you make sure that these people were where you wanted them before taking them down
mm,
to the low calories?
No, we've not done that. What we've done historically is we track their macros for about 2 weeks
Mm.
to make sure to get a maintenance calorie range or estimate, and then once we feel good about that, where they're not gaining or losing weight, then we would start our diet. But we have never traditionally have done any type of metabolic testing. We've tested resting metabolic rate. We do that on almost all of our studies, but not no blood work. And it's funny you did mention reverse dieting. Right now, my lab's currently doing the largest reverse dieting study that's ever been done in a fit population. We're hoping to get over 300 subjects that complete it. We're doing another big recruitment push over the next month, and then we're closing this study, or at least the recruitment. So that's a virtual study. So the subjects don't have to come into our lab. They just have to follow the diet we put them on, and we tell them just keep doing this same training program, resistance training program that they're currently doing. So we're going to be able, hopefully when the study's over, we'll be able to have some really good data on reverse dieting that could be used after any type of diet.
That's amazing. Reverse dieting is honestly like my favorite phase to take people through because that's when they really learn, oh, I don't have to crash diet for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about the rapid fat loss, you mentioned you may be in that deficit, low calories, cardio for so many days, and then back to what their estimated maintenance for a couple.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now. We spend about 2 weeks getting their maintenance calories. By the way, in our reverse diet study, we spend up to 6 weeks getting this data because they're not in our lab. So these other subjects, this rapid fat loss, you had 2 weeks to estimate their maintenance calories. Then we have them eat 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight of protein. So
Mhm.
1.6 grams per kg. It's about 0.75 grams per pound. And we say eat that and as little carbs and fats as possible for 4 days. And for most of this is a female only study. This is about 300 to 500 calories per day for 4 days. Plus, we're having them walk 6 hours per day during those 4 days. And then we do have them going back to maintenance for 3 days. Then we have them retested because if you were to test them right after those 4 days, the fluid shifts are
Yeah.
potentially severe. So having them go back to maintenance, that brings back fluid or water levels to baseline levels. So we retest them. And then for the next 30 days, they eat however they want. So it's ad libitum. And then we test them again to see if they maintain their fat loss.
And how much fat loss are you expecting, or I guess
Mhm.
expecting is the word to see in that period?
So I don't, I would love to say 1% body fat. Let's use that as our unit of measurement. I piloted this myself, and I lost 1% of body fat in all of my other previous studies, which is usually around a 25% caloric deficit. Over 4 weeks or over a month, we typically see about 1% loss of body fat and the complete maintenance of muscle mass. So I would love to say, hey, 4 days versus 4 weeks. What do you want to do? Do you want to diet aggressively for 4 days and lose a percent? Or diet for 4 weeks and lose a percent? And both of those, a percent of body fat loss is a lot of body fat. It doesn't sound like much, but 12% a year that's a different body. But at least in my case, I didn't lose a percent. I lost, I think, 0.7% in the week, basically the 4 days. So for me, it wasn't quite a percent. It might have been closer to a half a percent over the 4 days. So that's what we're seeing. I think I lost about 3 pounds over that time, which I thought I would have lost a lot more, especially going through it. I was the last night of my fourth day. I had another hour of walking, and this was getting late. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And I went to Publix, which is our Florida grocery stores. They're all over. And I just walked for an hour looking at all kinds of food. I was so hungry. And I was looking at, oh, I can't wait till I could eat this. It was very fixating.
Like a bodybuilder post show kind of situation.
Yes.
Was
Yeah.
it hard to control yourself like the fifth day when you could eat or
No, that's the nice thing about doing research. It my research, everybody would know. They wouldn't know, but if I'm doing a study or a case study, when again, I was just piloting it. It wasn't like my data counted for anything, but I'm very serious about if I'm going to do this, I'm
yeah.
going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I could do it. But my body is also currently weight loss resistant because I'm filled with black mold.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But let me say, then some people would rather be very aggressive for a short time.
Yeah.
Other people would rather take a more moderate or even a really modest approach for a longer period of time. And that's what's great. That's the essence of flexible dieting. I call it literally flexible from a broad perspective. What are you most likely, what are you excited about trying? I know for myself, I couldn't even stand the thought of dieting for 3 months in a row right now. So that I was very excited to try those 4 days. And now I need to lose more body fat. I don't know if I could do it again. Like it was not easy. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, oh, I'll walk 2 hours and I'll work 2 hours. I hardly got any work done. I was walking and resting, walking, taking a nap because your
Yeah.
calories are so low too. So it put me so far behind on work that I was not expecting that.
Can they
Mm.
use like a desk treadmill?
Yeah, oh yeah, they can use whatever they want. I didn't have one of them. I learned quickly. This was like, when was this? Probably September in Florida. And walking outside beat me up. You sweat so much. So
Oh,
I learned
gee.
quickly I need to walk on the indoor track, or if I had a walking desk, yeah, that would have been that's probably a good that would be
The
a
walking
good way to
pad.
do this.
The walking desk pad can be hard. I have to walk really slow on it. Otherwise, I can't focus or type things, but it's helpful for like calls and things of that nature. And that's one of my questions was, are there situations where you would recommend the rapid fat loss over regular fat loss? You've already answered it, but
Yeah, so one of the things that changed my mind, again, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I would have said, don't ever do this. Then I started reading some obesity research where the more aggressive people were at the start, so their initial, if the initial fat loss was greater, their long-term outcomes were greater because they had
Mm.
more success. So I couldn't ignore that data. I'm like, so now I've adopted this I think for this would describe a lot of people. They're most motivated when they start a diet. They're able to withstand a little more hunger and discomfort for the first week, 2 weeks. So my thinking is let's leverage that motivation while we can, because once you've been dieting for 6 weeks, you don't want to be aggressive in week 7. It's the last thing you want to do. And then the other thing that I noticed about myself as I'm experimenting with different things, if I'm aggressive for the first, let's say, week, let's say I reduce my calories by 40% for a week, and now I go up to a 25% deficit. It seems like I'm not even dieting. I just increased all these calories, but it's still a 25% deficit. But because I just came out of a more aggressive, I don't see it as that. I'm like, this is awesome. So there's that psychological. So I was thinking of what would I call this? And it might be like rapid initial fat loss efforts. So
Mm.
be aggressive in the early when the motivation is there. And then as motivation starts to go away, well, that start adding back in calories, but it's still a caloric deficit.
and that's something I remember learning from you and probably Lane Norton and a lot of people early on when I started coaching was when somebody is about to enter a deficit, the first calorie cut or drop has to be significant for the body to register change. Would you still say that's true? Obviously, I don't mean in the context of, all right, we're going down 300, but even when you're going with a slow approach, do you still feel that the change has to be bigger? Say, for example, we're reverse dieting, we're adding maybe 100 calories to somebody's intake a week. If you only reduce somebody's calories by 100, 200 calories, with say expenditures the same, they're probably not going to lose weight.
Yeah, I would say I don't think I was on that party bus initially when I probably should have been. I was always take this slow, be moderate. And it's all my research, which is still beneficial, but it was like 25% week 1, 25% week 8. It was just, but
Yeah.
you have to do that with research, at least to some extent. Now we have changed some things up, but this be more aggressive so your body registers change. Admittedly, I don't think I was there, but now something that you probably have thought for years, I think, yeah, that it makes sense. That's what you would do on many levels, not just registering change, but again,
Mm.
leveraging the motivation, creating an early noticeable success, a fat loss success that keeps people motivated.
And the interesting part that I wanted to bring into the conversation, and I know there's probably not a ton of research on this, and I want there to be. Part of me wishes I got a PhD so I can do research on by myself or whatever it is. I'll come work for you at your lab. It's 15 minutes from me, even though I'm not a student anymore. I wish I was. I'll come take one class. Does that count? If I take one class?
Yeah, I teach a class called the Science of Physique Enhancement. It's a master's class, and it's We probably spend 3 hours talking about rapid fat loss. We talk about sleep and weight gain, diet breaks, diet refeeds, all kinds of stuff. Water,
That's
like
so
fluid
cool.
intake. It's basically my dream class. I love it.
Is it fall, spring, both?
It is a spring class, so I'm going to be teaching it this spring, and it's Wednesday night from 5 to 7.
All right.
So yeah,
Ooh,
Um,
if not this year, probably next spring,
yeah,
probably same night, five to
I
seven forty. Yeah.
might have to go back to grad school for that. That sounds
that's
amazing.
awesome.
But thinking
Hey,
about the
and
population that we work with, and I'm seeing this even with some clients now, is we have all these women that have done all of the things and like actually done the things, not just feeling like they're doing it, but not in a deficit, but nothing's happening. They might even be gaining weight. And I'm pretty sure both of us have been that person because of an internal stressor. So that's where, if that feels like it's you and you're listening to this, the goal of talking to Dr. Campbell is knowing, all right, what can we do when your body is healthy enough to lose weight? Because what we've seen, and again, this is, I know something you and I talked about in Dallas, is weight loss resistance is a very real thing. It sounds like a very buzzy thing, but we've found that women who have gut issues, who have mold, who have hypo, their bodies, they don't respond the way that they should. And I'd be curious if you feel like you've come across that in any of your research yet.
not in my research, but my research has, up to this point, focused on young, metabolically healthy females and males to that. But I'm gonna hold up my phone. I've got
Oh,
thousands of direct messages, comments from women, mostly 40s, 50s, that have said, I've been fit my whole life. I track every gram that goes through my mouth. I don't miss a workout, and I'm gaining weight. So thousands. And some of them are on posts, so anybody can go in and just see the comments. I'm talking about direct messages. I haven't seen it in my research, at least not at scale. But now my research is shifting towards the menopause transition and weight loss resistance. So now I'm asking the questions and doing the tests where we would start to see this. One of my future studies will be, and this will be more of a case series approach, get women who self attest to, I can't lose weight. We get them and then we validate that. So we say, okay, you're going to eat 1,200 calories for 3 weeks or something crazy where they should lose weight. So we're going to validate, is that statement true? And then if it's not, now we're going to either give them HRT, give them the Mediterranean style type of diet, or anything, maybe a reverse diet. Like we're going to start looking, we're going to identify and validate that weight loss resistance is happening. And if it's not, great, because
yeah.
I would hope that it doesn't exist. I don't want it to exist, but my fear is that it does, or at least thousands of women tell me that it does. So then I want to research this on a case by case basis. And then once we get some original or initial data in, then we can start to design like an intervention study. That's the long term plan.
That would be incredible. And please count us in on that. We've got the
Yeah.
heads that can add to your study, not for long, but that's where it really does become the long game, right? We have clients that work with us for 6 months just to fix their metabolic issues so then they can diet. And this is where the world of fat loss and people call it functional health or internal health really can come together. And I think it's going to be a great place for you to dig your teeth in and start the research there.
Is that a hard sell for these women? Like convincing them, hey, you got to spend 6 months just to fix your problems before we can start dieting. I've always found when I have those conversations, I might as well be talking to the wall. Like
If
how is
that's
it?
who
Or have,
you're marketing to. If you look at our content, we don't talk a ton about like fat loss because most of our
yeah.
clients come to us feeling like complete trash, whether they have no energy, their hair is falling out, they have joint pain, they're so bloated that they look pregnant, they're exhausted all day despite sleeping 10 hours. So, for the majority of women that we work with, fat loss is a bonus. And it does happen. I had a client lose 12 pounds in 8 months eating at maintenance just because we fixed her gut, right? Because she's
Yes.
absorbing her food better. Like all things are pointing in the direction of health, and she is eating more than she ever has in her entire life, and she's postmenopausal. So it's not necessarily our client's focus, but the goal for a lot of them is, all right, help me not feel like trash. Help me have a sex drive. Help me be able to run around with my kids or my grandkids and eat out without being afraid that I'm going to have to run to the toilet. And then, as an added bonus, let's lose some weight. And that's typically why it
Yeah.
is a long game, because getting through some of those health issues does take some probing around and fixing, but it is very possible. And that's, I think, why I love what we do so much, because we're taking people who at one point felt very hopeless and probably had been turned
Yeah.
away by doctors and maybe other practitioners, and giving them hope that's not how they're supposed to feel in their body, in their mind.
Yep. So
Bringing
that
it
was
all
good.
together.
Thank you for that. That gave me context. It's you're attracting the women who aren't just hyper focused on fat loss, whereas that is my audience because that's what I talk about.
Yep. And we still do have that, right? We don't only work with clients that have health issues. We have your typical client that's, hey, I want to look ripped after having kids, because I think both of our backgrounds started with bodybuilding and the true physique enhancement side of things. So it's really a blend of all of the things. And I guess I'll leave you with one final question, unless Jess has anything. What would your biggest piece of advice be to a woman who feels like she is fit, she does the things to gain muscle, maintain muscle, but wants to start losing fat the right way, aka not crash dieting?
And also retain as much muscle as possible.
Yeah. So I think what I would say is and this would be more of a mindset than a strategy, have realistic expectations on time frame because everybody, including me, and I've been a fat loss researcher for over 20 years, I get impatient and I'm like, this isn't working. What am I doing wrong? This is embarrassing. I'm a fat loss researcher. If I just look at it over a 4 week period, I always lose fat. It's the day to day, or if this week I didn't have the scale didn't drop, I get worried. And if that happens to me, and I would say there's not many people on this planet that are more knowledgeable than I am about actual rates of true fat loss. I'm very aware that other people are probably much more in a hurry and quick to think it's not working. So I would say, as long as you're following the plan that your coach has you on, don't make any judgments until you have 4 weeks of data to look back on. And if you do that, that solves probably 99% of this anxiety and it's not working. All of that solves itself when you look at things over a 4 week time period.
Incredible. I agree with that. 4 weeks is a good period of time to tell and look at all of your data points too, right? Bill mentioned not just the scale, but are you doing photos? Are you doing measurements? Are clothes fitting differently? Things of that nature.
Yes.
Awesome. Dr. Campbell, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us on this Monday evening. Where can the listeners find you? I know you're on Instagram, so we can link that in the show notes and keep up with your work as well.
Yeah, so Instagram is the only place that they can find me, and that is at Bill Campbell P.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much again. And we'll be in touch, because even though I'm not a grad student now, I want to come hang out and help in the lab if that's the thing.
Yes, you're welcome. Yeah, what I usually do is invite people to my research team meetings. I have a pretty large research team, about 20 students. We just had our last meeting on Friday for the semester, but you're always welcome to come in and hear what we're doing. And we have goals that we set for ourselves, and if they don't do their goal, there's what we call a punishment, which is usually like karaoke or some kind of dance or something a little embarrassing to keep us accountable to doing what we say we're going to do.
That's so funny. That sounds like a great work and learning environment. Very cool. Awesome. All right. So if you're listening to this, make sure you follow Dr. Campbell. He has a lot of great content out there around mainly fat loss. But again, there's tons that you can learn from him. He's a wealth of knowledge. And I know he has been throughout my journey of coaching over the years. And if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe, share it with a friend. And thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight.